Hey, good evening, home church. So good to see you this evening. I hope that you've had a wonderful week. I hope that things are going well for you. We're beginning a new study, and this new study that we're starting is called Discipleship and Mission. And so we want to talk about a few things about discipling others, discipling ourselves. Sometimes we kind of forget the ABCs of things, and sometimes you have to go back and refresh yourself about the ABCs of certain ideas, the basics of things. And so tonight, as we begin, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the mission of the church. And there's like 13 lessons that we're going to be on for a little while until we get back together where we can meet together in our small groups once again. And so follow along with us. We're in Luke chapter 14 tonight, and it's called To Serve. That's the name of it, Called to Serve. And we are called to serve. This is a great story that Jesus looks around and he sees what's going on at a banquet, and he says, I got to share some things about this, about what you're doing here. I got to share some things with you. And so as we look at Luke chapter 14, let's start with, of course, our key verse. Our key verse is chapter 14, verse 11, which is, all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. We need to understand that the kingdom of God is totally different than the kingdom of this world. It's all about exalting yourself down here, making yourself look good, making yourself the best thing. All those slogans, be the best you can be and have things your way and stuff like that. But in God's kingdom, it's edifying other people. It's lifting other people up. It's if you want to be exalted, you need to be low. You need to be humble. If you want to do this, then you've got to do this. And it's totally opposite of what the world thinks. And so tonight, let's look at this out of Luke chapter 14. We'll start with verse 7, and we'll say a few things about the things that happen after the lesson here, after verses 7 through 14. So let's get started. And the first thing is we're going to talk about a humble guest. And then the next thing we'll talk about a humble host. And the first thing he's talking about being unpretentious in verses 7, 8, and 9 of Luke chapter 14. So let's go ahead and read 7, 8, and 9, and then we'll come back and look at that. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor. Now Jesus is here at this banquet. He's here at this food gathering, which was very common in that day and time. He noticed how people were picking the best places of honor at the table. He tells them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may be or may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. And so we want to focus on the three words that he uses here. Number one, picked places of honor. He's looking around. He said, wow, they're jumping, they're moving, they're shoving, they're trying to get the best places. Instead of just saying, hey, we're happy to be here. Let's just sit here. That was one of the things that was going on in that day and that time. Of course, at the king's table, at a dignitary's table, at a host who would host a banquet like this, you wanted to be close to them. Because the closer you were to them was a status issue. And Jesus was noticing that people wanted their status to be so-so, right? And so Jesus says, you know what? I think it's time for a parable. A parable is what we've always learned as kids was an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That was how we described it as kids. But it's a little more than that. The word parable is used at least 48 times in the Gospels. And Jesus spoke in parables so the people would understand what he was speaking about, what he was talking about. All right? And so they thought, I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm sitting people here jockeying for position. Let me tell them a story so they'll understand. And then he says, hey, do not take the places of honor. What do you mean? I don't want to sit back in the back. I don't want to sit over here away from. I want people to know I'm close to this guy. I'm part of his entourage. I'm part of who he is, you know. Sometimes we do that in conversation. We start throwing out names, events, things that we've rubbed elbows with, you know, these certain people just to kind of move our status up. And Jesus says, you know, don't do that. Don't take the places of honor. But he said, the reason you might be humiliated, because Jesus says, you know, if you happen to sit there and the host says, you know, here's some people I've invited. I did invite you, but this guy and this family, they've got a lot more for me than you do. In other words, they've got multi-millions, you only just have $1 million. You know, they've got several thousand, you only have a few hundred. So I'm kind of going to put them in that seat, and you could be in this seat. And he said, therefore, if you do that, you might be humiliated right in front of everybody as he makes you move and puts these other people there. Would that not be embarrassing? It may have happened to you sometime in somewhere that you had to move because you were in the wrong seat and you thought that was going to be your seat, and kind of can be embarrassing and stuff like that. And so Jesus says, let me share a parable with you. And the first part is about a humble guest. We continue with the humble guest in verse 10 and 11. Look at verse 10 and 11. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Our key verse. So Jesus says, okay, in these two verses, when you arrive at this feast, at this wedding, whatever it may be at the time, take the lowest place. Just start by being humble. You be that humble guest and just, hey, we're just glad to be here. You know, we're just glad to have an invitation to come and be a part of your celebration. Just grab that and let the host then honor you and say, no. You guys come and sit right here. You sit right by me. You sit right here to my right hand, my left hand, whatever it may be. You sit right here with me. Jesus said that's how we should do it. As believers, that's how we should do it. Don't try to jockey for the best positions. You know, James, the brother of Jesus, makes mention of that when he talks about people coming into the house and coming into the worship, about those, I need to be up here at the front and in the best places to sit, and you people be in the back. No. Jesus is saying, hey, right here, start with the lowest. Just humble yourselves and say, you know what, we're just happy to be here, and we're going to sit right here. We're great. And maybe the guest or the host will say, hey, no, you've got a better place than that. You've got an more awesome place than that. As children of the King, as we are, as children of God, we should be humble, and in due time, God will exalt us. Exalted or humbled, the humbled are exalted. Yeah, that's our key verse. All right, so that's the humble guest. Now let's look at the humble host. And the humble host, now he switches it, okay? Instead of just jockeying for the position, he said, what kind of host should I be? Who should I invite to parties and things of that nature? And so in verse 12, listen to what he says. Then Jesus says to his host, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do so, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. In other words, don't bargain with people or invite people that can pay you back and that you hope will pay you back someday. He says, so those not to invite are your friends, your relatives, and the rich. Because what we want to happen is they'll reciprocate the invitation. Hey, I had you over. Hey, I'll have you over. Hey, I'll have you over. Hey, I'll have you, you know. And so we get into that deal. Hey, it was you guys paid last time. Let us pay, you know. And sometimes we get, oh, it's my turn to pay. No, it's my turn to pay. You know, I appreciate there are those in our church family who are very good about that. They never do, hey, it's your turn to buy my meal. They always want to buy your meal. And that's something that I've learned from my dad and from Don Fabus and different ones, that it doesn't matter if they can pay you back. It doesn't, and you don't even look to that. You just say, hey, I've got this. I've got this. You know, if you go eat with someone, I've got this. And I think Jesus has given a great illustration of being a humble host. don't try to invite those people that you know can repay your invitation, that you know will invite you back. Okay, well then who do I invite? He's not saying you can't have your friends and your family and the rich people over, but don't do it for the idea of getting them to invite you and being a party, of that as well. And so he says, hey, be a humble host and be careful who you don't invite and be careful who you do invite. Here's the right action. And this is found in verse 13 and 14. He says, but when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Well, wait a minute. I'm not supposed to invite my friends and my family and the rich people that I hang out with. I'm supposed to invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. If our whole idea behind the invitation is to be repaid, Jesus said, yeah, that's who you invite. Because they can't repay you, all right? They can't do anything to repay you. And I guarantee you, you'll be blessed when you do that. This is a promise from God that you'll be blessed when you do that. How many times have you helped someone along the road or had people in your home and you've tried to help them get to the next station in life or something like that, and you knew they couldn't repay you or you didn't expect them to repay you, and once that's over you think, wow, I feel good about that, and it makes me feel good to do that. It's a fantastic feeling when you can help someone along the way who you know cannot repay you for your kindness. They said, now here's the people not to invite, because you're trying to invite them just to be repaid, just so they'll reciprocate the invitation to dinner. But here's the ones to invite, those who cannot do that. And so he says, hey, you be a humble host. You can be a humble guest, but you would be a humble host as well. Now see, this is where our lesson ends. But if you have your Bible open, you can continue to read after this. And Jesus tells a story about a guy who plans this huge wedding feast and sends out his servants to invite people to come. And everyone that he sent to invite, they all had an excuse. All had an excuse why they couldn't come. And the servant comes back and tells the master of the feast, hey, these all people had an excuse. And he says, go into the highways and hedges and compel those other people, the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, to come into the feast. Okay? Hey, this is a great lesson, and this is what we are. We are called to serve. And when you're called to serve, sometimes you've got to get down on your hands and knees and serve. You can't just stand above people and look down on people. You've got to sometimes get below and look up. All right? So let's look at some discussion questions, and then we'll close for the night. All right, discussion. How can we challenge common ideas about who to honor? Right? Think about that. How can we challenge common ideas about who to honor? We always want to honor those people who have these great things, great money, they had the money, that's why they could build this railroad or they could build this bridge, or, hey, let's honor them, let's put their name on this plaque, right? How can we challenge that? Just because they did that doesn't mean anything. It's like when Jesus was looking at the treasury and noticed what people were putting in the treasury, and the little woman who had nothing put all that she had. He honored her because she put everything she had, and they just put out because of their wealth, because they had some money, right? What are some areas that we should do better at humbling ourselves? Think about that. What are some areas that we could do better at being humble and serving people, man? Getting our hands and feet dirty for Jesus, right? Yeah. How can we do better moving out of our demographic and cultural zone? Wow, you and I, think about that. We have a zone of people in our lives, a area of people in our lives who are demographically and culturally probably about like we are. How can we do better about moving out of that and helping others who are not in our zone, whether they be richer or poorer, either way? All right, what are some ways that we can model humility with one another? What are some ways we can do that? Be gracious, be kind, be serving to one another. Care for each other. How can we keep our service motives selfless and pure when thinking about being rewarded later? Think about that. You know, Jesus says at the very last part of verse 14, although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. How can my motives be selfless and pure, thinking that I'm going to be repaid later? You know, because we can do that. We can, hey, so-and-so is going to pay me. I'll do this so that they'll pay me later. Yeah. We think the same thing sometimes about God, and we need to be careful that we're not selfish and that our motives are not impure, but pure. All right. Thought to remember, God's way up is down. God's way up is down. You want to be exalted? Fall on your face to people and fall on your face to God. And let them see that you're a humble person. Don't wear the badge of humility and show everybody. But they'll know you by your works, and your works will follow you, and they will exalt you, I guarantee you. Hey, may God bless you. May you have a wonderful rest of your day, the rest of your week, and we'll see you on the 19th. Yes, Sunday the 19th. Guess what? We're still talking about hot as hell, but that is National Ice Cream Day. So just a little hint about what may be coming this coming Sunday on the 19th. May God bless you. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.